Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. Sorry about that, was my phone falling on the floor. For those of you who don't know, my name is Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We do 3 posts a day. Race reviews, race previews, breaking news, car unveils, bike unveils, throwbacks, birthdays, and all that kind of good motorsport stuff that we all love. We cover everything from F1 to IndyCar to bikes to touring cars to NASCAR, rally, everything else in between if we can. So do give us a follow. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, search for the Hard Compound. You'll find us. Give us a follow. Hit the notification bell on Twitter. And also head over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel where all of these live interviews are saved. They're also saved in the video section on our Facebook. As I say, in case you haven't noticed, we do these live video interviews. We've actually done 3 in the last 6 days, which is wonderful. Just on Sunday, we had Alan Berg, and on Thursday last week, we had current British touring car driver, Mr. Rory Butcher. Week before that, we had Dan Camish, who's spoken with the likes of Brian Redman, with Mario Andretti, Jackie Ickx, John Watson, Jason Plato, Andy Prio, Carl Vendling, Emanuele Pirro, Steve Soper, Ari Lyndike, Willie T. Ribbs, Danny Sullivan, Alonso Jr., many great guests. They're all saved on the YouTube and on the Facebook. If you're tuning in tonight, though, you probably like a bit of touring cars and a bit of single seaters as well. We have a fantastic guest joining us in just a moment. We're going to bring him in very soon. He was one of the founding directors of the Williams F1 team. He was one of the directors of the BRDC and set up the BRDC Young Superstars scheme. He's raced in the British Touring Car Championship, various saloon car championships. He's been restoring a very famous car. He's raced in single seaters and endurance racing and many other things. So without any further ado, we're going to bring him in. Please join me in extending a very warm welcome to a British motorsport legend, Mr. Dave Brodie. And there he is, the man himself.
Thank
Dave,
you.
How are you? How's things? Are we all good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good, wonderful. There we are. Start off at 10. Dave, firstly, thank you very much for coming on, having a chat. Really appreciate you sparing your evening. There's been lots of people looking forward to hearing some of your tales. So yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure.
Fantastic. Right. Just before we get cracking, I'll turn my attention to the comments section. If you're tuning in, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're tuning in from, do put some comments and questions into the comments box, and we'll see them relatively in real time, and we'll try and work them into the chat as we go. Right. That's the intro done, I think. Firstly, Dave, how's everything with you? Obviously, you've been kind of unwell to a degree in the last few years. How's everything going on that front? Is everything okay?
Well, in 2010, they gave me 5. And I said to him, you've got to be joking. I've got too much to do. I can't go in 5. And here I am 13 years later, and I ain't going anywhere.
Happy day. Good. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
Seems like nothing has changed on track or off it, which is fantastic to hear. No, that's great news. And I found out very recently, for those of you who know where I'm based in Reading, and Dave, you're just down the road. I had no idea you were so close, because we spoke with Carl Jones and he said you weren't far. And I thought that was relative to the back end of Wales where he lives. But it is literally 5 miles, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I live at Whitchurch-on-Thames. And if you pass him, Peggy does a great coffee.
Oh, well, I've actually passed many times, but I haven't popped in. So I will absolutely be doing that soon. You just got to make sure that you're in as well, because I want to say thank you in person. Yeah, fantastic. See, yeah, someone's already put in the comments, run, baby, run. See, they love it. They love it already. Right, what I'd like to do then, if I may, how did you get interested in motorsport? What was your kind of beginnings?
Well, I went to as a tiny child, and I spent the whole time on my dad's shoulders. I went to the first Grand Prix race after the war. And I remember it was tiny, but I remember it was a really good day out. But I don't think that had any effect on it. But when I got old enough to buy a car, I bought an A35, and it was ridiculously slow. It could almost cycle as quick. So I noticed in the back of Autosport, under spares and accessories, that I can't buy bits that would improve the power. And over 6 months, I bought enough stuff to build an 1150cc engine. And I stored it all under my bed. I would not leave it in my garage in case some rotter turned up and nicked it. And I remember my darling sister saying, David, if you don't get those smelly bits of metal out of your bedroom, I will not clean it up ever again. I said, don't worry, kid, they're going today. And I took it over to Pinner, where my friend from school, Monty Roberts, who was just a fantastic guy and still is, we built the engine. And time came to put it in the A35. And excuse me, and we put it in there, and we went out for a spin and ran the engine in, and then I got a bump up the back, and I looked in the mirror and I said, that prick's just bumped me up the back. What's going on? Boom, and another one, and another one. And I looked in the mirror, it's another A35. It was a local guy called Jerry Marshall. So I went top to second gear, pulled about $7.5 grand and just disappeared. And that was the start of that. And then I went to Brands Hatch, and shoes off, we'd sit on the roof and watch the cars going up to Druids, and I could look inside and see them changing down and turning in. I wasn't that impressed with a load of them, but I said to Don and Roland, who were with me, here, I've just fallen in here. What do you mean? I said, the car we're sitting on would finish fourth in this race. Well, they took the pee out of me relentlessly. Yeah, but Brodie, we know you're pretty good, but these are professionals. I said, I don't care. I could finish fourth. And then the two Payne sisters, Payne, they said to me on Saturday morning, we understand you're going to be, and they looked at each other, yes, a racing car driver. Is that right, David? So I faked I was ill Monday morning, went to Watford, got myself a competition license, and I said to the fella, how do I get to do a race? He said, well, you've got to do you've got to join a club that's affiliated to the RAC. Right. Where did you come from? I said, Harrow. Wow, Harrow Car Club. I'm still a member. In fact, we had a meeting today at the Harrow Car Club. Wow. And I had so I've got the phone number, and I phoned this wonderful bloke up called Les Needham. He's still around. He must be in his mid-90s. And he said, yeah, he said, David, send me £2.50. You're in 2 races at Silverstone. So I went to Silverstone, did the first race. I did practice. That was the worst thing. I knew there were these things called racing tyres, so I put some racing tyres on the front. And I had to use 8-inch tyre levers to take the tyres off the existing wheels and then it was time to go out for practice. Well, I had 2 racing tyres on the front and Michelin's on the back. Now, an A35 in those days had a 3 1/4 turns lock to clock. I was on the end of the rack at every corner because I had grip at the front and at the back. And I didn't realize it was that. And I said, Dad, boys, I'm wrong. I can't do this thing. Well, they treated me like a leper. And Dad said, look, you've got to race, son. Just go slowly. I said, anyway. So we changed the tyres on the back, got the first corner, boom, straight through it. I thought, this is fun. And started overtaking a load of cars, got the checker flag and didn't realise I'd won the race. Just got the checker flag. I didn't realise I was the first to get it. And I pulled into the paddock. My darling sister's standing there like this. I can see her now. Yellow V-neck pullover on and a spreading dress. And I jumped out of the car and said, Susan, I'm all right. I didn't hurt myself. She said, no, you don't understand, David. You've just won the race. And that was, yeah, wow. And I said, and Dad came up all out of breath. He said, son, you've only won the race. I said, and I didn't know. You just overtake a load of cars. You don't know where you are. You're not getting headquarters. And I drove home and I remember thinking, I like this. I think I'll have some more. And I never stopped since 63.
Wow. What a great way to start. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I've done about 800 races. And I'm always on the front row. Yeah. And I built some brilliant cars. Oh, my God. I've had some fantastic cars. And the good thing about all my cars, don't ask me why, because I don't know, nor do my mates. I know how to make a race car handle. And you get more out of a good handling car than you ever get out of the last 20 horsepower. All my cars have been terrific handling cars.
Which is, I mean, and I've got just a few of them sort of listed here, which we're going to get onto very, very shortly. But I kind of like that. You almost fell into it, not by accident, but you didn't realize how good you were at it until you went and did it and won.
Well, it was a natural thing. I didn't find it difficult. Excuse me. I didn't find it difficult. And I remember thinking, and I kept my mouth shut, it can't be that easy to win a race. But I never said anything. But it was. Excuse me. And that was it. And I thought, I'll have some more of this. And I did.
Fantastic. And you mentioned, you've done 800 races. I mean, you've done so much in various different series and different times and through the decades. And so I'm going to have to sort of pick and choose what sort of comes up here, because we could be here for about 3 days and I'd love that. But I don't think those tuning in would.
The important thing about a racing car is you mustn't let them intimidate you. And I never got intimidated by a race car. And as I said, to be truthful, I've already said it, I found it easy. And I couldn't understand why I could find it easy. But then I realized a few years later, I got a natural ability.
Yeah. Which is a lovely thing to have in anything, and certainly in my book, in racing cars, which is terrific. You mentioned that you got your race license. Now, I did a bit of research on this. Is it true that you fiddled a race license in your friend's name just so you could go racing?
How did you know that?
I've just done a bit of research. I've read a few bits on the internet. It's amazing what you can find on the internet. Nothing dodgy, don't worry.
I got banned on the road. If it got banned on the road, the RAC wouldn't let you race. It's not like that now. So I just I got a competition license in my friend's name. He's still around, Roland Perrin. And I said, hey, look at that. And he went, bloody hell, bro, am I going to be a racing driver? I said, no, you're not. I am. I did my first races in his name because I was banned on the streets.
Amazing.
And,
that's amazing. I love that. I think
I kept crashing and spinning off. And Roland said, my reputation's already wrecked. If I decide to do any racer, they're all going to think I'm a tosser.
I think it was on that similar kind of thing with the research I did. Was it you went out and raced? I can't remember what car it was, but you're at Snetterton and you're racing in his name and you had a roll.
Well, I left the braking too late for the hairpin, and I was running out of road, and I thought to myself, bro, this is going on the roof, which it did. So I bailed out, cut the back of my head, cut my elbows, cut my knees. And when I walked over to the wreck, which was upside down, some people had us put it right. I started the engine, checked the oil, and drove it back. And then I built a brilliant Ford Anglia 1300cc. The 5 bearing blocks. So I de-stroked a 1500 block to 1300 because you just couldn't use that old full 3 main bearing crank. So it was a fantastic engine, downdraft carburetors. I did all the work myself. And my mates, including me, couldn't understand how I knew what to do, but I just did. And that was a fantastic car. And had a 5-speed box, which is a jackknife box, which is very unusual back then. And that was a pretty good car. I won a few races in that.
Wow. That's amazing. I just think, I did think of some of the young racers today, building their own car. I mean, they
don't do it.
Wouldn't know where to start.
The innovation has gone out the window. Young racers, they don't do their own car. They go and buy a car, or mum and dad does, or Uncle George does, and they go racing. But if you build your own car, you know everything about it.
Yeah. And that obviously is going to give you an edge once you're out there and getting your elbows out. We've got people. Just a few comments I want to come to. We'll come to that question, Diffan. Tim Marshall, any chance of a reprint of Last Train to Cockfosters, the book? We're going to come to that.
Yeah. Well, I've got that. I've got some copies here. If he wants one, just going to give me a ring and he can come and get them.
Oh, boom! Right.
I'm going to have my name. It is 5 volumes, 1,530 pages.
Oh, that's a bit of holiday reading, isn't it? Fantastic.
Well, nobody's ever told me it's rubbish. I guess they wouldn't.
No, it's because I'm sure it's absolutely brilliant. I haven't read it myself, but I will. He's also said that I remember seeing Brodie in a very wet Crystal Palace in the 60s in Run Baby Run. Absolute masterclass in driving in the wet. That's lovely.
Oh, yeah. Well, I give talks at clubs quite often, and people say, what's your favourite circuit? and it was Crystal Palace.
Was it really?
Just a dreamy circuit. The straight was really long. I'd get pole position there, and you'd be right back here, and it was a really long run down to what's called the S's, which was a tunnel of bushes and trees with an S-bend in the middle, and I was mustard in there. And by the time I got there, all the V8s would go by me, so I'd have a wall of V8s in front, and it used to take, and they used to do about lap 7 to get by them when they ran out of brakes and tyres. But and I'm diving about all over the place. But I mean, going through the S's at Crystal Palace was just fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I've never saw any racing there, unfortunately, but I've actually been there, and I actually it shows what a nerd I am. I actually had on my phone, I had a little like a layout of the track on a map where the circuit was around the park and everything, and I walked around it, and I told my mates, and they laughed at me. But I was just walking around it, the bits that you can walk around, and I was just thinking, this must have been absolutely fantastic to drive. It must have been great fun.
Yeah. Let me just tell you something. When you went down the long straight and turned right into the S-bends, which is a tunnel of bushes and trees, as I said, you'd see the light at the end, and you think, oh, that's good, that's the end. What you didn't realise is you went, oh, it was like going down the side of a house.
Yeah, because
I screamed. Yeah, I mean, I never mucked about. I was on it every time I went out, and I went through this little light at the end, and it went, oh, it was like going down the side of a house. And I screamed. I didn't know that was there.
I suppose that's one way to sort of get your attention, I suppose, when you're driving. Just another comment I have seen. We've got Jerry Marmee, ex-BTCC and Thunder Saloons guy in. He says, evening, Rich. Say hello to Dave for me. So there you are. Hello from Jerry.
Hello, kid.
Yeah. Good man. Top man. Yes, Jerry's absolutely brilliant. What else have we got here? We're going to come to that question at the end there about the best car you built. One thing I just want to move on to, I mean, as you know, from where we are currently at the moment in the Thames Valley, Williams are very close to my heart, the F1 team. As I mentioned off camera, my hero was like Nigel Mansell and Red 5 and all that. What people don't know is you have a huge part in the Williams Grand Prix engineering / Williams racing story. Before we get into that detail, how did you get to know Frank Williams? Because I've done a bit of research here, and I know it was through your father or your electroplating business and a bit of work that way, was it not?
Well, everybody in the south of England, they used to drive down from the north, would go to what was called Brodie's Chrome Shop. And that's how I got to know people. I wouldn't do Brabham's work because of Turner. He's such a rude bastard. You can print that. He was just a rude, horrible. He was born in England, but he was brought up in Australia. I don't know if that explains it. But I wouldn't do Brabham's work. So Turner used to sell a wishbone unplated and tell him where to go to get it chrome plated. And I never let a racer down, ever. So almost on a daily basis, guys would turn up with an unplated radius rods or wishbones and stuff. And I used to say, are you hungry? Yeah. Out of here, right again. A1 Cafe, it's still there. Best egg and chips in the business. I'll see you in 3 hours. And 3 hours later, they'd come back. They'd have and I used to hand polish the wishbones and rods and then run them through the twin copper and nickel and chrome.
Right.
Everybody used to come to me. As I said, Brabham would sell unplated components and tell them to go to my shop. I wouldn't do anything but Brabham.
Because you wouldn't do it directly. Wow. So obviously, you had a business that everyone knew, and you got some contacts through there. And Frank was doing F3 around that time, and that's how. And he was a customer of yours, wasn't he?
Well, the second time I met Frank, he was my kind of guy, and we just got on virtually instantly, really, really well. And he would phone me and say, well, it's quite amazing. He would phone me on a Friday night and say, where are you racing at the weekend? Silverstone Saturday, Brand Sunday, Thruxton Monday. Pick me up. So he'd always be down. If he was never late, I'd pick him up on the pavement. If he wasn't there, I'd just carry on. And he'd jump in the car, and he had a little red exercise book, and he wrote tiny little print and he would just disappear and go up and down the pits buying and selling. And he would say to me, "Can I stick all this stuff in the back?" I said, "Yeah, of course you can." So he was trading in the pits.
Wow.
And I'll just tell you one famous occasion. We go to Silverstone in my 3-litre Capri, and Frank says to me, "I know you'd be able to get them on board, but I've just bought 17 magnesium wheels." He didn't tell me he had bleeding tyres on it, did he? So I pull up, and I know he's watching me, the idle bugger, right? I know he's watching. I'm looking around. I think he's watching me. Well, I've got all these wheels in the car. Don't ask me how, but I did. And they're on the top, and we had one down behind us, one with the handbrake was, and we drove back to Harrow in 3rd and 4th gear. I had to get the car going in 3rd gear. I had to push it back to get it out. And we got out in the car, and of course the tyres fell forward. And the guys came out of the flat in the Pinner Road, and we were on the floor laughing because there's no room for anybody. Tweety couldn't get in there. And there was about 5 or 8 of us on the pavement outside crying, laughing, because it's impossible to get in this car, but we did it.
That's fantastic. I'm actually just want a little sidestep. I mean, you mentioned the flat in Pinner Road in Harrow. It came sort of infamous, I guess, to a degree. There was again through the research. I remember it was like Bubbles Horsley from Hesketh. He was knocking around at the time, and
he had a bedroom there.
Sorry,
Bubbles had a bedroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Blimey.
Yeah. Frank, you get this. Frank used to sleep in the lock-up garage on a camp bed and a sleeping bag. Wow. Now, you won't know, but this winter of '63 was absolutely savage. The snow never melted, or the impacted ice never melted till late April. Buses were stopped running for 6 or 8 weeks. And Frank slept in a lock-up garage in a sleeping bag. And if I'd known that, I had a spare room. He could have come round to my house. And he was always first up, always cheerful. And he'd make a mug of tea for everybody, take it round the bedrooms. And I never knew he slept in that lock-up. I assumed he had a bedroom.
Yeah.
Amazing. And it was cold. I cannot tell you how cold it was.
God, I can't imagine. It just shows how tough he was, physically, mentally. Just wow. I mean, again, I read a story here. He was after some money, right? He was after some money. I don't know if this is true. And you guys who were around the flat, he said, "We'll give you the money if you stand naked on the embankment by the railway line."
Oh, we did it. He'd come in and say, "I need 12 and 6. I need £1." And Bubbles Horsley would say, "Bro, go and get a breakfast bowl and do a collection. I'll think of a chore." And one was, you had to strip off. He was allowed to keep his shoes on and go up the embankment and get behind a small bush and flash the train. And he had nothing on except his shoes and socks. Grey socks, of course. And he came back and Bubbles said, No, Frank, we want a proper show. So we had to go back again, I behind this bush, and they did a proper, and then we let him in. And another time, the chore was to stand over the 1-bar electric radiator, the Dimplex radiator, give his bollocks a good roasting on a fork. And he'd go, "The fork's getting hot, the fork's getting hot. Carry on, Frank. We were just crying, laughing.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, this is where I wish they invented time travel. Oh, my goodness. That's fantastic. I mean, yeah. So you got in with you got in with Frank, and so again, I touched on he was racing an old Austin, which he sold to, was it Chris Airy, which I read about him, and that was very sad.
Chris Airy,
very sad episode.
It was a great lost talent. He knew how to drive. Oh my God, we used to watch him in the paddock bend, bosh, hold the slide down. And then he had this terrible accident at Bottom Bend. He went off, instead of feathering the car back in slowly, 2 wheels on the tarmac, 2 on the grass, he just turned off and it went up the embankment, up in the air, barrel rolled, he came out and he died. Yeah, killed him. It was shocking.
Yeah.
Chris Airy was a fantastic driver. And that woke us all up, I can tell you. You just didn't expect to see your mates die.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And obviously, unfortunately, that's been a recurring sort of theme over the years, which again we'll touch on, not in too much detail because we don't like talking about that kind of a thing. But Frank had obviously moved on to F3, and you did the work for him. Excuse me. Actually, just before I move on from Frank, I mean, just a few words on him himself, because obviously we know about the accident and his just single-minded determination to make it work, the mishap with Wolf and all that. But I mean, you were a big part of Frank's sort of story, weren't you? I mean, as you said on the phone the other week,
it could never have happened without me. I mean,
it's that big.
my money back, but I put some pretty heavy duty back in those days, heavy duty in to keep it going. It would never, without me. And Patrick had said to me, they should never forget, without you, bro, Williams would never have happened. And Frank had no idea about business at all. And he didn't even learn from one disaster to another. Yeah. But he had this overriding ambition. The only thing in his head was F1, to the exclusion of everything else in his life, including his family and everything. He just had F1 in his head, and one way or another, he was going to get there, and he did. And I did help him. Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, I read somewhere you were his financial savior. I don't know if that's being overdramatic or if that's the case, but it sounds like it was a huge part.
Yeah, I remember he needed some money, and I had 3 companies going. I phoned around. And I said, "You got any money?" "Not at the moment." "You got any money?" Third one, a company out in Rickmansworth, said, "Well, yes, we're quite flush at the moment." And I said, "I need 15 grand. How long can you do without it?" They said, "Well, we could do without it for about, I think it was about 10 or 11 days. So I said, "Frank, I'm going to give you 15 grand. That'll get you out of this present predicament, but the money must be back in the account because we always pay our accounts on time, in 9 days' time." And the lion sod said to me, "Oh, by the way, bro, I paid that money in." So that was it. I just thought we had. When I go to the office 3 weeks later, the lovely Pat Franzen, who ran the office, he said, "You know, this business would be a lot easier to run if Mr. Williams would pay that money back." I went mental. I grabbed hold of him, got him against the wall. And anyway, there you go. Yeah.
Did he ever weigh up with the money? Did he?
Oh, yeah, he paid back. Yeah.
Good. There'd been a big hole otherwise. Amazing. Also, just very quick info on Frank and everything. Last thing, I didn't realize until very recently, you're Claire's godfather. I had no idea about that. I didn't know you were.
Yeah.
Claire's godfather. I'm actually trying to get Claire to come on here and have a chat, but she's a bit reticent about social media and stuff. But I thought she did a very good job with what she had at her disposal when she was deputy team principal at Williams. I know a few people would disagree, but I thought she did a rather good job.
Okay.
Hey ho. Just want to sort of move on. Yeah, so you did the saloons racing, but then I've got here that you moved into Formula 3 with the Titan chassis because you did a bit of work with Charlie Lucas Engineering. Is that?
Well, I did all the chrome plating for the Titan cars, polishing and chrome plating, and that was the best chrome plating in the world. And I just said to him, "I'll tell you what, I'll have an F3 car with a spare set of ratios, spare set of mag wheels. When do you want it?" I said, first week in March." "Okay, all right, bro." And as he went out there, I thought, what have I done? How am I going to pay for that? I'm under thinking, oh my God, I can't withdraw the order. And a company called SNW, Screws, Nuts and Washers, who only ever gave me their urgent work, never got their bulk work, phoned me up and said, "David, it's George at SNW." I said, "Hello." He said, "I've got a lot of work coming your way." I said, "It's about bleeding time doing all your urgent work while your bloke sits having a cup of tea in my canteen." And I never seen them. He said, "No, I've got a lot of work." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the lorry's being loaded now and it'll be at your place in about 3 hours. And we work for 43 hours exactly, non-stop, with 2 of my guys, a guy called Jay and a wonderful guy, I just loved him, called Cyril Madrid, who I've since heard has died. And he wanted us to strip all the cadmium and zinc plating off, put it back in the sacks wet, pull it tight, and it was an insurance scam. So we did 43 hours of that. And he said, "You kept a running total." I said, "Of course I have. What do I owe you?" I said, I'm not sure, but it was something like about 2,700 quid. He said, right, I'm on my way around. The last load has been and gone. We worked non-stop, 43 hours. That's a long time. Day shift came on. I said, have you worked through the night? I said, yeah. They came in the next morning and said, don't tell me you've walked through the night on this one. Yeah. I let the other guys sleep on the dry sacks, but I never slept. And when we finished this work, I said, right, fellas, you've got a day off on time and a half. Don't come in tomorrow. They didn't come in for 2 days, and I slept for 14 hours non-stop. I went home for that. But in that 43 hours, I paid for everything. My Formula 3 car, the mag wheels, the Hewland ratios, the trailer, the 1200 Anglia van with the disc brake conversion. You know, before inflation, it wasn't a lot of money. But then when inflation came along, that was a different story.
That's incredible. There's some people don't work 43 hours a week now. Goodness me. That's absolutely amazing. I'm going to come on. Neil Beckingham's put a comment in. We're going to come to that in a minute, Neil, because you mentioned a Ford Escort, which, but you went racing in the F3 car. And I read that you beat a few cars. You beat an old F1 BRM and stuff like that. But was there issues with the chassis? I remember reading somewhere you had chassis issues. On the, was it the Titan?
Oh, yeah, it was shocking. Yeah. If you spun it, which I did in practice quite often, it had a set on the front, so it would move up. I didn't know that. And if you spun it, it might go the other way. But I never spun it in a race. And so it had a set on the front. Of course, it understeered. And I remember I could never do the old woodcut flat, terrifying. And the other thing it had was the oil was taken down the top tubes of the chassis to the oil cooler and then back the other side, which was a great idea. Except the welds had holes in them, so my whole tubular chassis filled up with oil. Oh. So I was racing and I'm working 12-15 hours a day during the week, so I can get time off to go racing the weekend. So I never came to terms with it because it was sliding about, it was locking wheels up, it was doing this, that, and the other. And that was the end of that at the time.
Yeah, just thought it was time to go back to saloons.
I couldn't slide the thing into Paddock Bend like I could the saloon cars. I could get the rear end out, loads of power down the hill, and up the hill, and I just loved that. So I thought, bollocks, I'm going to go back to saloon cars.
Go back to it. And again, was this the Ford Anglia with the Lotus engine? Was it the car known as Big Nelly? I've read.
Well, amazing you got that. Well, it was known as Big Nelly in the workshop.
Right.
It was a 2-litre Lotus twin cam, and the biggest one then was about 1,700. So its nickname in the workshop was Big Nelly. But then I did the first race in Primer, and I'd led a couple of laps, and I'm thinking about shaping up for the last 2 laps to win the race, which I would have done. And suddenly it went on to 3 cylinders, and I finished 6th on 3 cylinders. And I remember standing on the boards of the car going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I remember looking at this lot and saying, well, you better make the most of that. You'll never do that again. And they never did. And that was it. Once I knew it was going to win races, I didn't know what colour to paint it, because when I looked around the paddocks, every colour under the rainbow was there. So I thought, I don't know what made me think it. I thought, well, I'll do black. That'll look evil. So the geezer down at Felton painted it black, did a magnificent job. Yeah. He called me down and I looked at it. I went, oh, blimey. He said, well, it's a fantastic. I said, yeah, it's fantastic. I said, but there's 2 things missing. And I really did say this. He said, well, what's missing? I said, a taxi sign on the roof and a turban behind the wheel. So he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And I was in a car going to Brands Hatch with my mates, and I just suddenly thought of the pinstriping in canary yellow. It was never gold. And I thought, yeah. So I got the sign writer down. I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Pinstripe that panel, 2 on the bonnet, 2 over the roof, boot lid. I said, can you do that? He said, yeah. I said, you got bright canary yellow? He said, yeah. He said, I'll need trestles and planks. I said, George? He said, yeah, I got them. And 3 days later, he'd finished it, and it looked sensational. And I had a canvas cover for the car, so I put it over the car so you couldn't see the colour. And everybody's saying, well, what colour is it, bro? Because it was in primer when they last saw it. I said, you'll see when you get the Brands Hatch. So we get the Brands Hatch. And I'm with my best friend Graham at the time. And I said, we undid the Bundy clips underneath. I said, right, pull it back to the roof. And when he saw this paint job, he said, I don't believe what I'm looking at. So we're racing a gypsy caravan, are we? And he walked off. He just disappeared. I went, where are you going? Anyway, I got the thing off, got it on the tarmac, just in the paddock. And there was never, from that moment onwards, there was never less than 10 to 50 people around that car. It just looked sensational.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's just the power of a paint job.
Yeah.
Obviously that then that kind of developed onto in your next car, which you came to, but you said you won loads of races in it. You had great success, and then someone came up to you and offered you some good money for it, and you got shot. But again, I've read here that you were dreaming up this absolute monster of a Ford Escort, which we now all know about. And I've got here that this was the one that I believe became the Run Baby Run car that you've been working on. And I've got just some notes here. It says a fuel-injected 16-valve Cosworth head with 9,000 RPM.
Yeah, that's right.
That is pretty monstrous.
It's not so monstrous now. I've got one in the car now, but back then it was pretty good. Run on engine, a 9K.
Yeah.
I had 297 horsepower or 296, whatever horsepower. Yeah, 290 horsepower. It went really well, and I remember I thought I saw Run Baby Run on a little oval thing on a Hillman Imp,
right?
And I thought that'd be good. I'll put that on the front of the car, not knowing. And I live in Whitchurch-on-Thames now. The geezer that had that on his car, on his dashboard, John Calvert, had got that out of a packet of sweets when he drove up to Snetterton with his kid. And he was around the corner. Unbelievable. He said, bro.
Great coincidence. He lives around the corner.
Yeah, he said to me, where'd you get Run Baby Run from? I said, well, it was on the dashboard of a car I saw at Snetterton, Hillman Imp. He said, that was my Hillman Imp. So you got it off my car? I said, yeah. Well, I'll be darned. And he just lives up the road.
Yeah. Has he got a free T-shirt? Does he?
That one, yeah.
cracking stuff. But what was the thinking behind it? Why the Escort? Why, or was it just something that you just came by? Or
well, it was a natural progression. Once I did the 5-speed 1300 Anglia, the next car to do was the Mark 1 Escort. So we did the Anglia, and we ended up putting a 2-litre engine in it, and only ever did 2 races. Pole position, fastest lap, won the race twice. And when I drove it out of the paddock at Brands Hatch, big tall guy with 2 kids with him, said, I want to buy this car. Well, we wanted to sell it. It was in the way of the Mark 1 we're building. And I said, well, okay, $2,000. Well, you remember you can buy a flat back then for $3,000. I said, it's $2,000. And he undid his jacket and he said, I've got 1,800 quid. So I said, Norman, who shared it with me, do you want to take 100 quid? He said, yeah. And I never saw the car ever again. Never saw it again. He borrowed my trailer, brought it back, but I never saw it again.
Wow.
Amazing. It just disappeared.
It'd be amazing to see if that's still around now.
Yeah, that was a hell of a good car. And I'll tell you a little story about that.
Yeah.
To get the lightweight, we'd use a Monodex cutter, a thing like this. We cut all the floorboards out, everything went, and with PK screws and no sealant, we'd put 22 gauge aluminium sheet in, which you can cut with house scissors. And, so if it rained, you got out of the car, it looked like you'd been wading in a pond. And anyway, we're going onto the straight with my mate driving it, and he said, there's a terrible bang going on the straight. So I said, right, we'll take the floorboards out at the back. And I put my head there. The circuit was going by like this. I had a Beetle haircut. And looking underneath, I'd never seen like it. The wheels were doing this, even on the straight. I wonder, thinking, Christ. It suddenly went round this kink on the way down the steps and straight, wallop, there's this huge bang. And So we went in the paddock. I said, I know what it is. The engine's moving. They said, Brodie can't move. It's 2 inches for anything. So I went to a peerless fencing, took a strip of galvanise out, put it across from wheel arch to engine to wheel arch. So that locked the engine in place. No more bangs anymore. And then we did a proper engine stabilising bar in the paddock.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
And I put my head through the ragged floorboards. The circuit was doing this. The noise was definitely and it just showed you the torque of an engine changing gears. When it changed in gear going onto the main straight, the engine went boom, boom, bosh. Amazing. That's a lesson learned.
Wow, that's fantastic. So just while on the subject of the Escort, I mentioned we were going to come to a question here. A bit like Neil Beckingham, he said that he used to run an Escort on used F1 fronts sourced by Dave Abrahams and sold through the famous Ilford Emporium. Did you do the same?
I don't understand the question.
No, he said used F1 fronts sourced by Dave Abrahams, sold at the famous Ilford Emporium. Does that ring a bell with you?
No.
No, I guess it.
F1 fronts. It means tyres.
That's what I'm thinking. So, Neil, if you can clarify, stick it in the comments and we'll come back. No problem.
Yeah.
Happy days. Anyway, right. Moving on. Obviously, yeah, you won. He's just said Burton's.
Sorry?
Neil's just said Burton's.
Burton's.
Burton's tyres. Yeah.
I don't remember.
No. Okay. No problem at all. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, so obviously you gained a bit of a following and won some championships, and it must have just been a great time to go racing in the Run Baby Run car. It must have fond memories.
If you're winning all the time, that was pretty good. And I pretty quick realised nobody's ever going to beat me. So, and I drive the whole race absolutely flat out. I'll be as quick on the last lap as the first lap. And I was just thinking about it earlier today. I realised that I was driving harder at the end of the race, still was doing quick lap times, than I was at the beginning. And I thought, what was that? And I suddenly realised it was the shock absorbers. Couldn't be anything else. So I got on a plane, flew into Cologne, hired a car, drove to Eda Patel, went into Bilstein, and I said, I'd like to tell you a problem I've got. And they said, this is very perceptible, David Brodie. We're going to build you some shock absorbers now that won't do that, will never do that, because they've been gas shock absorbers. And it was just fantastic. I was good
them there and then.
I was really good at figuring out why things were going wrong, which not everybody can do. And they treated me like a prince there. I go to Bilstein and they would do me shock absorbers every year. If they did them for customers, I paid. But for me personally, and there was the most marvelous guy there called Hugo Emder, German. I never met a bad German. He was just fantastic. And I met him at Le Mans in '94, and I've got my overalls tied up around there. And he said, David, what are you doing here? You should be in your English garden, not this crazy race. And anyway, I phoned up and they said, oh, we got some sad news, David. Our lovely friend Hugo has died. Oh, God, you should have told me. I'd have paid my last respects. Well, he said, David, he didn't say this about anybody else ever. He said, you always look after the Englishman, David Brodie, because he wins races and puts our stickers on. And that made me cry. It was he was a nice man.
Yeah.
Man, he looked after me just brilliantly.
Yeah. What a lovely thing to say as well. I mean,
and he said,
little things like that make a big difference, don't they?
Yeah. You always look after England and David Brodie. He wins races and puts our stickers on. Unbelievable.
No, that's top draw stuff. That is. That's class, real class. Just moving on a little bit. This is something that I've sort of again picked up. The Lotus 62 from Chris Barber.
Yeah, lovely guy.
Yeah.
62. I did 2 races, one at Hockenheim and one at Nürburgring. and it was a very, very difficult car to drive because you couldn't slide it, and the steering was really heavy, so you couldn't steer it in and hold it. And when I did Nürburgring, I was so tired. I had pins and needles in my hands. This ear was killing me because the plug had come out and the carburetor was here. And I wasn't strong enough to drive it around the carousel, so I drove around the tarmac at the top. And I was not. I was in a shocking state. I vomited, so I got all gear down here, and I refused. I said, "I'm not." They gave me 3 laps to go, and I thought, I just can't finish this race, but I ain't going to stop out on the circuit. And I went across the line, and it was the last lap. Oh God! And I pulled around the back of the pits. I got all this muck in front of me and stuff like that, and they pulled me out and they sat me on a couple of tires, and I drank a milk bottle of water, and I couldn't move for an hour. I was absolutely slaughtered. I'd never been so weak, but I didn't pull up on the circuit. I went across the line.
You got to the finish. I mean, and for those of you who probably haven't heard, this was an endurance race in, you know, I can't remember the exact distance. Was it? It was about 3 or 4 hours, wasn't it? Because it was 500k.
It was 3-hour races.
3-hour race.
Yeah.
And it's one of these where you're going to have 2 drivers per car, aren't you?
Well, I never had 2 drivers.
But you did it on you did it on your own.
You were allowed to do it back then by yourself. And as I said, I did Nürburgring and Hockenheim. And there was a great story at Hockenheim. I barreled him round getting the 3 laps into qualify. And when I first drove the car, I got a box full of neutrals at Silverstone. I only went 100 feet. I said, "Hey, what's going on there?" He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll sort it out." And it was the internally splined right angle, the gear change went like that into the box. Get to Hockenheim, I'm burrowing down the straight, I get a box full of neutrals again. And I get out of the car, and this internally splined right angle drive hadn't been tightened up. It's only 2 5/16 nuts and washers. Anyway, second practice comes and goes. I went to the clerk of the course and I said, "Look, I've been round the paddock. It's a ZF box. Nobody's got a spare one. Can we go out the circuit and look for it?" He said, "Yeah, of course you can." I said, "He's got about 2 hours of daylight." So we go down to the chicane. I look back up the circuit, which is like a train line. And I said, "Well, what's that on the side of the circuit up there?" They said, "We don't know." So I wandered up there. It's only laying on the side of the circuit. So I put it in my pocket. They never asked me what it was. So I made them look for it until it was dark. I said, "Right." My mate Michael was with me. We only had 20% vision. I said, "Michael could be really handy now." I said, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, he can't see very well. He's only got 20% vision." They were going potty. And we drove back to the pits in this shooting brake, which is full of junk and rubbish. And when we got there, I put it between the seats. I said, "I think we can do something with this." And Benny, the mechanic, he screamed the car down. "Where'd you get that?" I said, "It was on the circuit when we got out there 2 hours ago."
That's what you get for not tightening it up.
They should have asked me what it was, shouldn't they?
Well, yeah. See, inquisitive mind needed. Brilliant. Well done though for making them look for it. Fantastic. Just at the time, I did a look into this. The race at the Nürburgring that you said that you were absolutely knackered. This was 72, wasn't it?
Yeah.
72.
72 in the 62.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw it was there were 96 cars on the grid. Is that right? Yeah. Or something like that?
Yeah, I finished 14th.
Out of 96 on your own.
Yeah. And then when I went to Hockenheim, it was the same 96, I guess. I finished 14th again.
Wow.
But you know, back then the drivers weren't very good. And I remember when I did the Nürburgring, I thought, well, I don't know the ring. I'll just follow the guys in front. Well, they were useless. 2 of them spun off. They didn't know what they were doing either.
They were even more useless. I mean, you said that the drivers at the time weren't that good, but in the Nürburgring race, I did see there was Arturo Mazzario, Vic Elford, and Brian Redmond were in the race. So
they were, yeah.
Pretty good. And we had Brian on the other week, and he's brilliant. We love Brian.
I don't know him now, but he was just a lovely guy.
What a lovely chap. I actually did say I did pass on some wishes because you spoke on the phone a few weeks back and you said pass on some best wishes to Brian. So I did that and he does say hello. So
Oh, bless him.
yeah.
Very nice man.
Yeah.
Very
Oh,
nice.
lovely guy. And we had Mike Wilds on and he said that
Yeah,
Brian was the best racer he ever raced against. So
it was.
it was like Mike Wilds said that Brian was the best racer he'd ever raced against.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
very good. Just another one at the time that popped into my mind actually right at the last minute this afternoon. A real good driver at that time was a guy called like Bowley Pittard, wasn't he? And
One of the
he
greatest racing drivers ever.
just, I mean, and one of those people that probably nobody would have heard of unless you're a complete nerd like I am. But as you say, just a huge loss because he was very good, wasn't he? Just really
Well,
awful what happened to him as well.
well, he got the money from the Great Train Robbery,
Did he
and
really?
yeah, with Roy James, and
Wow.
Roy said, "Get a
We'll
factory,
come on to that.
buy a couple of Formula 3 cars." So that's what he went and did. And Roy got banged up. He was on the loose, and he had a Lola at Monza, and they topped it up on the grid and spilt petrol on him, and he caught fire, and he was very badly burnt. They got him out, and he died of overwhelming shock in a Monza hospital, but he was in a bad way.
Oh, goodness.
But the funny thing is, when Chris Craft, bless him, went to see him, he said, "Chris, how's my tackle?" Chris went, "Yeah, that's all right, Brodie." He said, "Okay, I can accept this."
Priorities. Oh, yeah, I want to show you what a lovely driver. And again, Tim Marshall tuning in on YouTube. Hi again, Tim. He's just said that Bowley Pittard was a great alpha driver. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant.
Very good. Right, we've got a few people mentioning 89 and the BTCC. We're going to come to that very soon, guys, and we're going to come to Ronnie Peterson as well, because a few people asking about Ronnie. But it's probably a good time to move on to the time of the BTCC, because it was around 71 that you got into it with the Run Baby Run and all that. Why did you want to go down the British saloon car racing route as it was at the time? Again, was it a progression?
I did the single seaters in the Titan, and if I'd have realised what was wrong with the car, because I'm working 12, 15 hours a day, the mechanic I on it was completely useless. I'd have stayed with single seaters, and I'd probably be dead now or paralysed.
Sure.
But I just missed sliding cars into Paddock Bend on full throttle and getting up that hill, and I just missed that, so I went back to saloons.
Okay, and obviously the BSCC as it was was taking off pretty well, and you had a race at Silverstone. I believe you took 5th or 6th in that first race in just that one-off race in 71, and then 72 with the Norman Reeves Sterling Cooper racing.
Well,
how did all that come together? Getting on board with those guys?
Well, I only got beaten once in a Mark 1 Escort, and that was the great John Fitzpatrick. It was a fantastic driver and my hero. And we did long circuit Silverstone at the Grand Prix, and we went round bumper to bumper for the whole 20 laps. And I remember thinking lap 17, well, you better shape up to overtake him. And then I said to myself, bro, you're really going to have the impertinence to gut the inside of your hero, John Fitzpatrick. So we went across the line like that. He's the only one that ever beat me.
Because you didn't want to
just
one up him.
I couldn't do it. He's such a fantastic driver.
Yeah.
And he's a very nice guy as well. And he's still around. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
So I had respect, you see.
Sorry?
I had respect.
Which is a huge thing, which a lot of people don't have these days. They just sort of they're in it for themselves, which you have to be to a degree, but if you respect someone, you have to show it.
And absolutely. I remember Ralph Broad. Do you remember Ralph Broad? He had Broad Speed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he came up to me and I thought he was going to get cross with me. So I took my watch off, dropped it back in the bag, and I was ready to whack him. And he came up to me and said, Brodie boy, nobody's ever effing well done that to one of my drivers. Put it there, mate. Fantastic. That was a proper bloke.
Brilliant.
He was lovely. He's passionate.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Did things the right way as well. Yeah. Just mentioning Broad Speed, we've got the guys from Andy Rouse Sport, Andy Rouse Engineering tuning in. Hello, folks. We're going to come to your questions in a moment. Obviously, you had sort of some success in various different classes. And the first half of '73 was like pretty good. Excuse me. Had some class victories in Class C. He came second overall in 71, 72. But then I don't really like talking about these accidents, these horrible ones, because you were badly hurt and we lost someone in this one. The accident at 73 at Silverstone, which I'm sure some people have seen photos of it. I have. Kind of wish I hadn't. I guess what happened with it, because it was probably the worst crash in saloon car history in this country. I'd probably venture.
In the championship in Europe, I couldn't be beaten. None of they could beat me, and nobody could beat me in England. And I could have gone by Dave Matthews in the Capri the previous lap, and I thought, no, I'll do him up the inside of the next lap. If I'd gone by the previous lap, I'd have won both championships, and that accident would never happen. But I waited, and when he got to the Old Abbey, he was out of arms, where before he'd been sitting like this driving. Suddenly he's leaning in like that, and he'd undone his belt, because you get an arm pump. I mean, I'd be going down the straight trying to get blood back in my arms. One arm, one on this every straight, and no power steering then, you see. And he just went off to hit this Mini. We were lapping, guy called Gavin Booth.
Gavin Booth, yeah.
And he hit it, and I went, wow, blimey. And his Capri instantly barrel rolled, and he came out of it because he's taken his belts off. He was
that's the photo I referred to. He
was hanging on by one bit of seatbelt, and I remember looking at him like that, and I remember going in my head, "Effing hell, David," meaning him. Press on, Brodie in second place. With Frank Gardner's boot was just disappearing, and I pressed on, and the Mini rejoined the circuit in the opposite direction to the racetrack. It got me head on. And he eventually died. I think he died about 3 days later in Stoke Mandeville. And I ended up in Northampton General with my leg in 23 pieces, which they wanted to cut off.
Yeah, I heard there was a risk of amputation, wasn't there? A real.
Well, they thought I was still asleep, and I heard him say, best thing is take him down at 8 o'clock in the morning, lop it off, and let him come to terms with it. That's something you won't forget. And I went potty. And I got myself up my airballs. I pulled all the string off, the bits dripping into me, stuff squirting all over the place. And I said to him, get me a phone. I said, you ain't cutting my leg off, and I shall go over here like a slug. If you don't get a phone, I'm going to be on the floor, and I'll drag myself out into Northampton High Street. And then I fell asleep, and a guy came up to me, tapped me on the shoulder. The window was there. And he said, I hear you giving our doctors a hard time. I said, you can F off too. I said, all I want is a phone. He said, no. He said, I'm the physiotherapist here. He said, there's no operation on your leg. I said, I'm an engineer. Just cut it open, deaden it. I'll do it all. Don't worry about that. I really did say that. And he said, no. He said, but you're in fantastic shape. I mean, I had a six-pack and everything else. And he said, the only thing we can do, have you heard of dynamic tension? I said, yeah, of course I have. He said, have you? I said, yeah. He said, what is it? I said, that's when you lock a muscle, 7 seconds, relax. And if you do that for 10 minutes, you'll be sweating. He said, that's all we can do. So he'd come in 3 times a day, and I'd do 20 minutes 3 times. And after about 12 weeks, I could feel a grinding noise in my leg. I said, Clive, I haven't said anything, but there's a kind of grinding noise in my leg. In fact, there's about 5 distinct noises. This is good. And 2 days later, there were 3 distinct noises. And 2 days after that, there was no noises coming from my leg. And I said to him, there's no noises, my leg's quiet. And he muck about, he got that bed, pushed it out of the walls into this huge lift. and put me in the queue for X-ray, and they pushed the bed back into my slot an hour and a half later, and he came down the middle of the ward and he said, "It's a miracle. It's a miracle. We've done it. We've done. Oh, don't refracture. Don't move a muscle. Stay still." And that was it. And about 2 weeks after that, they built me a frame to keep the weight off the bone, so it sat on your bum muscle, this round ring, and bolted into this big boot. Well, it's a vulgar thing. And I left the hospital, and I noticed that anybody that had their leg elevated for a long time, when they put it down, it used to have a terrible effect on them. So at night, I'd get my leg, undo it, and hang it over the bed, so that when it was time to stand up, I wasn't going to have any of that old nonsense. So I stood up, and they said, and I had nurses all around me. They said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I feel great." They said, and I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" They said, "We don't know." I said, "Well, I'm going to go across and shake the hand of Alan, a kid called Alan." So I went up, and he had the sheet over his head. So I tapped him on his head. I said, "Hello, how you doing?" Shake hands. So I waddled back again, and I said, "I'm going home today now." They said, "No." I said, "I'm going home. I can anything you want me to do, I can do at home." So that was it. I was gone in the afternoon, and I drove home. I took the frame off, threw it in the back of the car, never put it on ever again, and I drove home.
That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it. See, they don't build them like you anymore, Dave. They don't build them like you anymore. Just a quick word, actually. You were on the actual incident, though. You were saved by the marshals. They did a great job from what I've pieced together. We got to say a huge shout out to all the marshals all over the world at motorsport circuits because we can't go racing without them. So big thumbs up to the marshals.
Well, the thing about the marshals, I think I was the only one who did it. I used to wind my window down and give them 5 coming out of Beckett's.
Oh, brilliant.
Go right over, and they go like that. We go, and they always came to see me in the paddock. So I'd get 5, 8, maybe 10 marshals come by in the lunch break to say hello, which was lovely.
Fantastic. It works both ways.
Yeah, they were really decent guys.
Yeah.
And I used to make a fuss of them, which nobody else did.
Yeah. And they do deserve to be made a fuss of because they're absolute superstars. They're all volunteers these days, and yeah, absolutely brilliant bunch of people. So you've got, we've got a few comments here. Carl Jones, we'll come to that one, Jonesy. Don't worry. While we're on the subject of Carl Jones, huge thanks to you, Jonesy, for putting me and Dave in touch. Absolutely brilliant. Much appreciated. There's a pint of something in it for you. You came back to the British Saloon Car Championship in '76 in the Mazda. How did all that come about?
So I didn't hear. I was reading about Carl Jones.
No, that's all right. We're going to come to Jonesy's comment in a minute. We love him. He's a good lad. You came back in '76 in the Mazda, in the Savannah. I was sort of a cracking looking car. Was it any good to go racing in?
Oh, I turned that into one of the best cars I've ever had. I mean, we did. My mate Ken Britton did the engine, so the engine was good, and it went around to 9,000 RPM. And I did the brakes. The flywheel weighed 42 pounds. I put an aluminium one on, and that was a fantastic car.
Yeah.
And I sold it to a kid in Sweden, and he won for 2 years. He won everything every weekend.
Did he really?
Yeah. Never rebuilt the engine or anything. Well, they were virtually a self-cleaning engine anyway.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. You set it up and it's gone and it's won races elsewhere in someone else's hands. It just shows how well set up it was. Then you moved to the Ford Capri. When was that for me notes here? Was it 77, 78, that kind of a time? Was it a self-run thing? I saw it was like had the Brodie racing team. Was it something that you'd?
Well, I ran it myself and I built it myself, and it was one of the best handling cars I've ever had. And I got it to handle. I get the paddock bend or Cops Corner, 3 bites of the cherry. That's no good. Just half a second every bite. So I took the whole axle off, took it across the road from my plating shop where they had the biggest fly press you've ever seen, and I bent the axle. And there's no bites of the cherry then. Get in the corner, plant the throttle down, that was it.
And off you go.
Yeah, I just bent the axle. Negative on, I think I had a 1.25 or 1.5 on the rear tyres, which is just a suspension. It's just fantastic. Beautiful. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think it might have been Neil Beckingham who commented earlier. He put a photo up on the Hard Compound on Facebook of you approaching Lodge in the Capri sideways, smoking and stuff. It was just an app. I mean, you were probably about 30 yards short of the apex, and you were sideways. Just
yeah. Well, what he doesn't know, what he must remember if he was there, it was wet.
Yeah.
So when I got to the top of Lodge, bunged it in. There's a guy in a Dolomite behind me, and I got a lot of oversteer like that, and I just left it like this down the hill and fed it back again and won the race. The guy behind must have thought, well, that's you gone, I'll win this one. Well, he didn't. I've always had terrific balance. When I played, when I skated and played ice hockey for Wembley, I had terrific balance, which you've got to have. So I've been blessed with that. Racing a car is about balancing it after you get off the brakes and up to full throttle. And the turn-in is everything. When you turn in, that's the bit that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just get it rotated in, and yeah. I mean, it's like in almost everything you talk about on track, it just feels like you've got a knack. I don't know, like a kind of a mechanical mind and just a feel for things, and it just lends itself perfectly to to going racing. And that's obviously been the story the whole way through for you, which is obviously a huge advantage. Absolutely superb. Excuse me. There's a question. Chris Phillips, evening, Chris. He said, this brings us on quite nicely because your next car was the Mitsubishi Starion. He said the Starion was iconic. What are your memories of the car? He said it was such a fast one.
Well, I got the deal to run the Mitsubishi Starions in the British Touring Car Championship, and I went to Michael Orr, who owned Colt Cars. I said, you got a car that can win the championship, and I want to build it for you, and I'm not interested in coming second. I want to win. And he liked that. So he sponsored the car. And that was a beautiful car. We made a fantastic job of it. Yeah. And Ken Britton did a brilliant job on the engines. So really nothing could take that off. So yeah, that did a bit of winning.
Yeah, it was. And
I built 2 Starions for Japan.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. And they ordered another 2 cars. They could do the chassis out there. So, and this is ludicrous. I said, well, there was no DHL in those days. So I did 2 sets of suspension and I put them in 2 cases, the biggest cases we had. I mean, it's everything, disc brakes, struts, everything. They were so heavy, I had to get them off my kitchen tabletop onto a chair, and then Kath and I dragged it through the house. Then I used another chair to get the 2 cases into the back of my Capri, which was like this. And I made a promise they'd have the suspension. So I drove to the airport, went and got a trolley. They had little ground wheels, and even the grey wheels were flat. It was so heavy. And I gave 2 porters 20 quid. It was quite a lot of money back then. I said, can you get these over to a ticket office? Yeah, it's all right. So she said, you got any luggage? I said, I've got 2 cases. So I said, fellas, can you put them on there? So they put them on, and the thing was like this. It went, bonk. So heavy. She went, good God. Can you push it through? And it went onto the belt behind. That was going, yang, 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 yang. It went, yang, 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 yang. And it disappeared through a curtain. I thought, well, I'll never see them again. Same thing with other. The extra luggage charge was £1,760 back in then. That was a load of money.
Jeez.
And I thought, there's no way. These frogs are never going to put this on the... So I got the plane to Alaska, then down to Narita, and I thought, I'll never see this stuff. And it came around the belt. My cases never came through. And then I thought, well, that's it. I've just done all this for the fun of it. They're stuck in France. And suddenly 2-barred gate open, and a trolley came out, my 2 cases on it, and these 2 Japanese going, racing driver. I said, yeah. And we pushed it and took it out, and they put the cases outside on the pavement, and you were only allowed to go in, stop, get out, go, stop, go. It was narrow, very narrow. I put the 2 cases there, and I made a phone call to Mitsubishi. I got some jack money, and they turned up, and the 2 cases were like this. And the guy in the first car ran at the case, got hold of the handle. His feet were 5 feet in the air when he fell over the front of it. It was so heavy. So anyway, I got him out there. That was it. And yeah, 2 suspension sets. God, blimey, they were heavy.
That's incredible. Amazing.
You make a promise, you got to keep it.
Yeah, if you're a man of your word, you deliver on it.
In my electroplating business, I never let anybody down. If I said tomorrow 11 o'clock, it was done. And I've never let anybody down. If I say I'm going to do something, it's going to get done, one way or another. And I don't care how it gets done, but it will get done. Yeah.
Love that. That's how the world should be. That's how everything in the world should be. Oh, Mark Hudson, he's just put a comment in. Says, I remember the Starions, a bit of a trick inlet manifold. Ooh, a man who knows what he's talking about. Think about the manifold. Ooh.
Well, it was a 2-injector engine, and Ken Britton made an adapter plate so we could get 4 injectors in, but fueling was free. There was no trick inlet manifold. We would have polished it and cleaned it up and done a proper job. I don't think there's any particular thing special about that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
happy days. So something I did see actually while I was doing this, 1983, right? You took 3rd at Silverstone in the last round, right? Between behind Jeff Allen and Steve Soper.
That's right. Another lap, and I'd have had both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were also disqualified at the end of the season, weren't they, for all the gubbins that was going on?
Effectively, I won that race. But
I was going to say, are you claiming a win?
No.
God,
listen,
you'd have won it anyway.
All they had was modified rockers. So what? So what? You know, the crowd loved them, and that was it. Yeah. And they were 2 great guys.
Yeah.
And who was the other guy?
Steve Soper.
Yeah, 2 terrific guys. I mean, Steve was a Harrow guy. I used to take him racing when he was 8 years old.
All right.
And he always asked me sensible questions. I used to think, that's quite clever.
It's quite refreshing, yeah. And I bumped into Steve and Jeff at the Super Touring event at Brands Hatch, and I had Steve on here a couple of years ago, and yeah, he's just a lovely guy, and no nonsense, but just a nice chap.
Yeah.
Top racer as well. You did get the first win though in '85. I've got that. Thruxton. Do you remember that one? Thumping around Thruxton and taking the win.
Yeah, I was in a different event to the rest of them. I'm doing 19-1 round there. They're all floundering around at 20.8, 22 sec, 122.
No, you were 2 seconds a lap.
Yeah. And I was only braking twice a lap for the 2 chicanes. I wasn't braking round the back. I was flat out through church, everything.
Well, so it was just the complex and the chicane at the end, was the...
Yeah. And I remember when I was on the Q tyres, I wanted to say to myself on the way into church, Brodie, you're not going to do this flat, are you? And I only managed Brodie, you're not. And I was in the corner. I was doing 185 into that corner around there. And I never came off the throttle, flat out. Boom. Curving the way out. Boom, boom, boom. That was fantastic. I loved all that.
That's how you do it. Keep your foot in. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. 86, you just did a couple of races, but you won one of them at Silverstone, as you do. Just rock up and take a win. Nice to get a win at Silverstone.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it was kind of paid me back for a bit of grief I had there a few years earlier.
Yes, I guess it was a slightly different memory of the place after 73. This is the bit people are going to want to hear about. The RS 500 in 88, 89 to 90. It was the Brodie Britton Racing one that you also put together. It was obviously the car to have. As I said, I spoke with Carl Jones and with like Jerry Marney and Graham Good and all these kind of guys who were racing the RS 500. It was obviously the car to have. How did you go about getting yours all put together?
I bought a motorsport body shell from Ford.
Right.
Built it we built it at BBR. Wasn't a difficult thing to do. Ken did the engine. I did all the suspension stuff, and with my mate called Martin Bates who worked for us, we just built it.
Put it all together.
And took it out in primer. I might have told you this, I can't remember. And there's a load of things wrong with it. And I said to him, I finished 6th. I said, right, here's the job list. You do that. I'll show you pole position at Thruxton. They did all the jobs. I went out, did 1 lap to make sure it was all right. Put the Q tyres on. And I winked at them. I said, it's going to be now, 3rd lap. I was a 3rd lap king. And botched across the line, 1 minute 19.1. Nobody got near it. In fact, if I'd have seen a result sheet like that and somebody else had done that, I'd have gone home. And that was it, 19.1. The next fastest was Gravit, I think, at 1:20.8 or something.
Jeez.
I was only braking twice a lap.
Wow.
So
it was just set up and you could just go and drive it. And
yeah. And I noticed that I was taking lines around Thruxton. None of the other drivers were.
Right.
Yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
There you go. There's a secrets to it. I mean, on the very superficial level here, I love the color scheme on it. I thought it looked absolutely brilliant. I mean, as I said, this was my era of touring cars when I really got into it. How did you come up with the color scheme on it, just out of interest? Because obviously you'd had the black and gold before, which I think JPS nicked off you, to be honest. For the F1 cars, you can take credit for that. But how did you come up with the colours? Because it was all brightly coloured, and I loved it.
I mean, the black and the yellow pinstriping.
Yeah, it just looked fantastic. It was a similar.
Well, the car was in primer. Did the first race in primer, so now it's time to paint it. And I was up at Snetterton, and every car you looked at was every colour of the rainbow. They looked appalling. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just do it black. Nobody's ever had a black race car. And he phoned me and said, come and have a look at this, bro. It looks fantastic. And I went and looked at it, and he'd done an amazing paint job. But there was something missing. And I just dreamed up in the car, pinstriping it in canary yellow.
Yeah.
And he got the sign writer down. I told him what I wanted. And he just did the most magnificent job, with the stick and the brush.
Yeah.
Really clever.
Superb.
Nice right angles, twinned across the bonnet, boot and roof, boot lid, and it just looked fantastic. And they all said, well, what colour is it? Because they'd only ever seen it in primer.
Yeah.
And I had a canvas cover over it. And I said, well, you'll see when you get the brands.
Yeah.
And I said to my mate Graham, right, pull the cover off and roll it back to the roof. And he looked at it and he said, well, I ain't working on that. It looks like a gypsy caravan. He stormed off. And I said to Kath, what do you think? And she went, and the moment it rolled off on the tarmac, there were 10 people around it. There's never less than 10 to 50 people around it. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just heading back to the RS 500, we've got Paul Linfoot in. Obviously, he is the man with RS 500s, Mr. RS 500 himself. Evening, Paul. Hope you're recovering well from some recent surgery. So I hope you're well. Right, we've got 89. Season started pretty well. Came 5th in the opening round. You were behind Roush and Gravit and Bristow and Good, but you were right on the pace. You were always right at the top end, but then this famous speech of yours at Thruxton, which everyone has been asking me about. I've had so many messages. People haven't even said hello. The messages just said, ask him about Thruxton. Tell him what he said in the interview about the other drivers and everything else.
Well,
it was absolutely brilliant.
Well, it was an act. I put it on. I had a pink towel around my neck, and I put on the voice. It's not me. And I said, all these drivers prancing around the paddock in their racing overalls, and pretty to the point. And it was actually true. And of course, the truth pisses people off like you can't believe. And they all complained, or a couple of them complained to the RAC. It didn't like what I'd done. But there you go, too bad. It was the truth. It's only the truth that pisses people off anyway, as you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, for anyone that hasn't heard it, I've actually just typed a bit of it out here because it's just it's so funny. You said that they prance around in their overalls, but when it comes to getting the business done, they're a bunch of wallies, apart from Andy, who's Rouse. The rest are a bunch of Group N drivers. Guy Edwards has had more spins than Rock Around the Clock. Frank Sitner's had more rolls than Joe's Corner Cafe. I've never seen such pitiful, ridiculous driving like it in all my life.
Yeah. Well, I rehearsed that. I knew I'd get interviewed, and I rehearsed that, so I had it all planned. And
that's brilliant. And it's done the job. Here we are, 4 years later.
Yeah, Frank Sitner was a great guy.
I actually had Frank on last summer, and he comes across as being quite miserable, but he was lovely. He's such a lovely bloke, isn't he?
Oh, fantastic bloke.
Great guy.
He was going to sue me, so his solicitor said, "Right, let's go by race. What happened there? Well, I spun. What happened there? Well, I spun. What happened there? Spun." He said, "I don't think you've got a case to answer." And he told me that. And when I became a director of the BRDC and Frank was a director, he came up to me and said, "Bro, we don't have a problem, do we?" I said, "Frank, you're a fantastic bloke. I love you. Of course we haven't got a problem." And he gave me a hug. That was lovely.
But you had him worried, which is always fun.
Yeah.
Just seen we've got like Jerry Marnie has said that he didn't complain. He said, "I didn't complain, Dave." And Carl Jones, you've got to come back here. Where are we? Jonesy said, "I've forgiven Brodie for calling me a Group N turkey at Thruxton. He said that he loves Brodie. He's a proper top bloke and a good friend."
Oh, good for you. Yeah. Who was that, Carl?
Yeah, that was Jonesy, yeah.
Oh, he's my favourite guy. He's lovely.
Yeah, he's a good lad, isn't he? Lovely, lovely chap.
Yeah.
But we can't say too much. Big head and stuff. We don't want that. No, it was absolutely brilliant. And one thing I did see actually in the comments, I'm just going to scroll up here. Sorry, folks. Andrew Collier, he put a comment in earlier on. He said in the famous interview at Thruxton 89, he told it how it was. "But I always remember, as an Andy Rouse fan, you singled him out as the man you respected on the grid. Why did you view Andy so differently?" Good question.
Yeah, well, he was, Andy got the job done. He was a really great driver, and he never bitched and moaned, so he's okay with me. So I singled him out with the exception of Andy. And he beat me a couple of times. I can't remember what him, but he did. So, yeah, I always had respect for proper people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the pretenders didn't do too well out of me.
No, clearly not. Just a quick throwback. We've got Graham Cuthbert's just put a question here. It says, if Dave would be prepared to tell us, what was the story with him, the late, great Frank Williams, the late, great Ronnie Peterson, Tim Schenken, and a quick exit from Mallory Park? I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by this. Thank you, Graham.
Well, Frank and I were down on the grass at the hairpin at Mallory Park, which you could do back then, and we could watch the guys changing around and going around the corner. And I turned around and I said, "Yeah, Frank, that's only Ronnie Peterson behind us with Tim Schenken." And Ronnie had a fur coat right down to his ankles. Yeah. And he's a beautiful looking man. That blonde hair, blue eyes. Oh my God.
Was that the first time that you'd met Ronnie?
The first time I met him, yeah. And right. So we hung out together there. And then Tim Schenken said to Frank, "Do you know the quick way out of here?" He said, "I don't know. Brodie does." He said, "Oh, we're following." And Frank turned and said, "Well, how the F are you going to keep up with Brodie?" And I said, "Frank, that's Ronnie Peterson driving. Of course you keep up with me. He's a proper driver." He said, so we went out the circuit, turned left whenever he was going right, went through a few villages, and we only had one road to go down to join the main Leicester Road and onto the M1 south. And it's completely full of cars. I said, "Frank, I ain't sitting around here with these two behind me." So I went down the lane. And just as I was getting out of it, a horse box turned in. Nobody's going to let me in, are they? They've all sat there doing this. So I said, "Hang on, Frank, I'm going up the earth bank." And I had a diff in the car. So I slid up the earth bank, got on the top, and then slid down into a garage forecourt. And when I looked in the mirror, Ronnie's only following me. How can he do that? And we slid down, boom, boom, went out the garage, joined the Leicester traffic, and I drove my nuts off on the way home, past Silverstone, cross country. I knew the place like the back of my hand. I could not get rid of this Peterson bloke. He was, I mean, I did him on top speed, obviously, on the motorway, but he was, and every time I looked in the mirror, Shenkin's going, what do you mean like me? Anyway, we get to the roundabout outside my house on the main Marlow Road down to Henley. And I said, Frank, I ain't settling for a draw here. We got to win this one. And Frank's got the Sunday Times with a flat cut in it so he can see the accident. And I went round the roundabout. I'm on the back of the rack, sliding round. Cars have stopped. One bloke got out, sounding like this as we're rear-ending round. And just as I got to the last bit, there's a big triangle of gravel in the middle of the road. I said, hold on, Frank, we're going left. Left, slid across it. And Ronnie had to do another lap. Got it. And I'll never forget, he came into my house and he ordered lemon tea. And Cass said to me, what's lemon tea? I said, I don't know. Give you some not too hot water in a glass and squeeze a lemon in it. All right. Put a bit of honey in it or something. And he sat down very quietly, drank his lemon tea, and he suddenly said, what I don't understand, and he had semi-broken English then, what I don't understand is, how could a Capri be as quick as a Lan in the corners? And of course, Shenkin and Frank looked at me, and I went, Ronnie, he's sitting in an armchair by the fire. I said, Ronnie, it's really simple. Simple? What's simple? I went, it's called talent, Ronnie. It's called talent. And we fell about laughing. It was just fantastic.
Oh, wow. What a lovely memory to have.
My time with Ronnie Peterson was the best 6 years of my life. It was like our chromosomes jumped into each other. And we just went everywhere together. Wherever he went, I remember he phoned up about nearly 10 o'clock one night and said, Locust Mechanics been on the phone. They want me at Hethel at 9 o'clock. I'll see you at 6 o'clock. There was no question of, do you want to go? What he never knew is, as soon as I got back from that trip, I'd have a slice of toast and a mug of tea and drive to my factory and do all the work I would have done during the day. I never told him I ever did that. And I must have done that a dozen times. I never told him. There's no point. Yeah, but I never let anybody down. In my electroplating shop, if I said it was going to be ready when it was going to be ready, it was done. And I didn't care if I had to work till 4 a.m. and sleep on my sofa in the office. I never let anybody down. And that's a secret to success, I think.
Yeah.
They could rely on me. And people used to come into my plating shop. Oh, hello. I'm only 22 or something. And they say, where's this bloke David? Could you find him for me? I said, it's me. And they'd say, you're David? I said, yeah. Oh, right. Well, I understand you do the work you say you're going to do. You don't let anybody down. No, of course I don't let anybody down. What's the point of me telling you I'm going to do it for Thursday when I know I'm not? They said, well, what about that? I said, yeah, when do you want it? He said Thursday. I said, might be done. I said, it'll be 11 o'clock in the morning. What, you're going to do it for tomorrow? I said, yeah, you want it for Thursday, don't you? It's Thursday tomorrow. So I never let anybody down.
Brilliant.
I get a new customer every other day. Where's this David? That's me. You, David.
Repeat Groundhog Day, but that's the way you got to do things. You know, if you want success, you've got to go at it. You mentioned, we'll come back to Ronnie very, very quickly in just a moment. I just want to talk. Someone actually said I have to ask about the 1991 Sierra Sapphire because someone said, these are not my words. Someone sent me a message. They said the 1991 Sapphire looked brilliant, but it looked like it went like a dog. What was it like to drive from your side, given that you were behind the wheel?
Well, that Sapphire, it was a four-wheel drive car, so it couldn't be beaten in the wet, and it was fastest off the line. Yeah. But I'm not going to mention their name, I used a four-wheel drive system by a famous company, which didn't four-wheel drive, and they knew it. And I went and saw the governor, and he said to me, would you like a cup of tea, Brodie? I said, yeah. He said, you found us out, haven't you? I said, yeah. I said, done four-wheel drive. And he said, you're the only bloke that's ever figured it. But it mainly went on rally cars, which never see the same corner twice. And so the car actually ended up a front-wheel drive car. And So I had to throw it all away and start again.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah.
Someone did ask me just on the page today, or was it yesterday? Said, do you know what became of it? Do you know where it is? Because you had it for a while, didn't you? Or
The Sapphire,
yeah.
I think we still got it. It's been painted white. It's up in my workshop, and I'd like to sell it. It's beautifully made. We still got it.
Well, I'm going to contact the chap that asked the question and see if he'd like to.
It's for sale, and it's beautifully constructed. I mean, it's just fantastic, and it's on posts up at my workshop 3 miles from my house where I am.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'll let him know and see if anything comes of it.
I always hung on to my race cars because you'd never get a decent price for them. I just didn't want to give them away. So I invariably had my race cars for a long time until I got a decent offer. Then I'd sell them.
Yeah, brilliant. The right way to be. Very quickly, got Carl Jones. He's put in a comment here. He's obviously had got a message from Nick Jordan that I'm going to read out, from Nick Jordan and Irene. He says, "Can you send a message from Irene and I, as we cannot do it from our laptop, please? Boom Alley, Paddock Bend. Thanks, kindest regards, Nick and Irene." So,
well, they're the two nicest people you'll ever meet. They're absolutely divine. Wonderful. And Nick Jordan came to work for me, and he was just spectacular. And I remember I was desperate to do a load of work on the car, but I had a huge amount of work at the factory. And he as good as begged me for the job. And I looked into my garage. I said, okay. I said, listen, there's a job list on the bench there. I said, don't put anything back on the car unless I've inspected it. And I'll be back at 5 or 6 o'clock. I got back home. And Cass said, who's this bloke that keeps coming in making himself a cup of tea and raiding our biscuit tin? I said, oh, yeah, it's the bloke. Well, when I went in there, the garage was immaculate. He'd even put a shelf or two up, and all my stuff was laid out beautifully. And I looked at it, inspected it. I said, right, that can go back. So, I always inspected everything before it went back on again. And I mean, last thing I want is the disc cracking at the end of a straight. Yeah. So I was very, very good like that. So any cracks in the ventilated discs, I'd get a needle drill, and then I'd check it out at the next meeting, and then get a new disc. I was good like that. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, lovely stuff. I'm very aware of the time, but very quick, I just want to touch on the Le Mans. You in, was it 94?
94.
How did that come about? And did you enjoy it?
A guy called Charles Bailey walked into my place and said, I hear you build good engines. And he said he wants 2 engines for Le Mans. And I said, yeah, you'll have to have that on the T3.5 turbo. That T4 be no good. He said, no, I've been to 2 other people. They all say it's got to be a 2.4, the big turbo. I said, it'll never work. It means you've got to run the engine between 5 1/4 and 8, and that engine won't stand it. I said, you want the T3.5, which gets the power on at 3.5. And he went away and came back. He said, I'm going to trust you. And I hear you're a good driver. I said, yeah, I know how to drive. He said, right, here's the deal. Do me 2 Le Mans engines. I said, I'll do you a race engine and a practice engine. And I want you as the 3rd driver. So I said, yeah, I'll do that. And there was 2 drivers. One half helmet can drive anything, and there's nothing he didn't know. And he lied a lot about his drive at Le Mans. Said he was the most economical driver. He wasn't. He used more fuel than anybody. And I drove the Le Mans car on its torque curve. So I got 13 litres less. I used less at the same lap times. I used 13 litres less fuel, and William Hewlett, the other driver, he used 8 litres less fuel. And this other bigger just couldn't do anything with him. One of those know-all racers.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he wasn't from England.
Yeah, I mean, what was your what are your memories of like racing at Le Mans? I mean, I've been very lucky. I've spoken to a lot of people on here who have excuse me who have raced at Le Mans. I mean, I had like Alan Berg just last weekend, and I've had like Steve Soper and Mark Blundell, Derek Warwick, all these guys that have won it, even like Jackie Hicks, and they've all said, apart I think all of them apart from Steve Soper said that they loved Le Mans, and Steve was terrified because it was too fast and too dark. But what are your memories of it?
Well, I thought it was the best week's racing I've ever had. I mean, I led it as a rookie, LM2, and we have every pit has a marshal to make sure you behave yourself. I had this big German, and I didn't know I led it for 5 or 6 laps as LM2. And he came up to me and he said, I have to shake hands with you, Mr. Brodie, because when I go back to Germany, I want to tell my friends that I was looking after the pit of a man who led Le Mans as a rookie. So he shook my hands. I didn't know I'd learned it. And LM2, it was fantastic. But I would not go buy a car until I was absolutely certain the car in front knew I was behind him. I'd hang back because the most terrible amateur accidents happen like that.
Yeah.
So I'd stay behind doing this to let them know that I was there. Yeah. So I drove incredibly carefully, and I never forget going down that straight to Indianapolis, and you turn right, and there's that lump like that, and it's like a launching ramp to the moon. And I thought, Jesus Christ, am I going to do that from down like that? And then you have to stand on the brakes and turn right and go down to Indianapolis, which was the fastest parts of the circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I really enjoyed that. It was a terrific week. Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And obviously that hump in the road, we've seen a couple of cars take off, haven't we? With
if you're driving on the street, it doesn't look like anything, but when you hit it 190, it looks like a ramp to the moon. Like that. Yeah, amazing.
Yes, it was Peter Dunbrack, wasn't it? He went up and into the trees and
got up. So amazing.
Crikey, fantastic bit of track. Right, I'm just going to again very wary of the time. I don't want to keep anyone too long. Mentioned off camera, I'd like to speak about some of the sort of friendships that you formed with, sadly, some people who are no longer with us. We mentioned Ronnie, and you said it was the best 6 years of your life. I think a lot of us, we've seen the Super Swede documentary, and of which you are on. And I think everyone loves the story about you being the chauffeur at the wedding and them not recognizing you. They genuinely had no idea, did they?
No. Well, I went to Monty Berman's, the stage outfitters, got the flat cap, the buttons, the tunic, and the boots and everything. And I turned up. I had a Bentley, and I turned up the morning Ronnie's wedding, and it was a few steps down, and he went, "Barbara," because they all speak English. "Brodie's got a chauffeur." I said, "You daft prat, it's me." He said, "It's Brodie. He's dressed up like a chauffeur." He said, "But you're supposed to be signing all this." I said, "Look, it's a shotgun wedding. You know what that means, don't you?" Yeah. I said, "Well, when you go home and tell your respectives, tell them you never had a witness, so you got the chauffeur to do it." And Ronnie went, "Oh, yeah, that'll work." I mean, he was a sweet boy. Oh, my God.
Brilliant.
He was so lovely. I just absolutely adored him. Yeah, so lovely. And he didn't have a mean bone in his body. He's just the nicest guy. And I miss those guys. Oh, dear.
I mean, it's lovely that you said that, because obviously I had Mario Andretti on here a couple of years ago. Obviously he was Ronnie's teammate at the time that he was lost, and he said that he knew that obviously Ronnie was injured at Monza, but he said that he found out that Ronnie was no longer with us when he drove down the Autostrada. He was on the hospital. He was going to the hospital to see him. Drove down the Autostrada and was at the toll booth, and basically put the window down to pay the toll. And the guy in the booth recognized him and said, "Oh, have you heard?" And that's when Mario found out, and he just said, Mario said he can't really remember the next 18 hours after that. It was just an awful shock.
I'll tell you something. Ronnie really liked Mario. Really liked him, and we couldn't wait for Ronnie. I mean, Ronnie had agreed to stay behind Mario because they wanted Lotus sales in America.
Yeah,
the bets were off once they got to North America, and Ronnie said, "I can't tell you." He said, "When I get up there, I'm gone." He said, I'm fed up riding around with one hand on the wheel and one hand on the gear lever behind Mario. And we just couldn't wait. We'd got all our tickets booked and everything. And then that terrible thing happened and he died. Yeah. Oh, God.
Awful. And I think, obviously, from us watching from the outside, I mean, obviously it was before I was born, but I know all about it. And from us watching from the outside, it was so needless that he was lost. He shouldn't have been lost. And I guess, you know, it's just 1,000 times worse for those who knew him, that fact. And yeah,
well,
I'm actually getting quite upset talking about it, and I never, you know, so.
He was the most lovely, wonderful guy I probably ever knew.
Yeah.
I just loved him. Oh, dear. Yeah. Oh, dear.
Yeah, sorry. We'll move on. We'll move on. So it's just lovely to hear such nice words about him. Another chat. You actually mentioned off air before we came on. Barry Sheen. I'd never realised that you were close with Barry.
Yeah, Barry.
What a guy! I would have loved to have met him and Mike Halewood, because I love his bikes, and those two guys I'd have loved to have met.
Yeah, he was the brightest sportsman, well, I've ever known. He was so clever. Oh my God! And I elaborated that in my books about it, because he was just fantastic. And I don't know where he got. I don't know why he was so bright, but he was clever, very clever. And I go on about it in my book quite extensively. And he was such a lovely guy. And if he liked you, that was it. Nothing else mattered. And he liked me. And I remember going down to his house. Was it called Chartwell? It doesn't matter what it's called. And it was on a Monday. And we had a bit of a thing in the office about something, which will take me a long time to explain, but don't worry. And then we went into the kitchen, and because they didn't have Sunday lunch, they were having their Sunday lunch on the Monday. And a big bowl of baked beans came onto the table, steaming baked beans. I said, what's that? She said, what was his wife's name? Stephanie, was it? Very
yeah, something like, yeah.
It was fantastic. I loved her. She said, Bro, he won't eat anything hot without baked beans. This bowl of steaming baked beans. What a bad move, actually. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I love it. I love these little stories like that. I absolutely love it. There's another one. Again, we're going to move on to something happier in a minute, but I know you were close with Roger Williamson as well, and did he come to see you after 73, the crash?
Yeah.
In hospital.
I'm up in Northampton General Hospital. This leg's in 23 pieces. I've got a busted jaw, I've got busted teeth, I've got burns all over my back and my knuckles and stuff like that. And he came to see me on the way to Zandvoort. And
on the way. Wow.
Yeah, and I said, Roger, stop. I said, listen, when you go over those blind hills at Zandvoort, nobody else will see it, but you'll see it. There's a huge half moon of sand dust on the circuit. Always give yourself a couple of feet room. And he turned around and said, don't worry about me, bro. I'll be in to see you on the way home. I never saw him again, only in the car. And he was a fantastic talent.
Yeah.
He won at karting, he won at Formula 3, he won at Formula 2. You couldn't have stopped him at Formula 1. And he had this beautiful driving position. When you see a driver sit back like this, and so he can turn in, because turn in's everything, you know you got a good bloke. So he used to pull himself back, go down a bit, and you could turn in. There's no power steering then. And it's turn in's a point that matters. Turn in, and when you get back on the full throttle, that's all about. If you're the quickest bloke on the straight, nobody can get you. Yeah. I tell everybody that.
Yeah. But again, just another needless loss of someone, which shouldn't have happened. Obviously, David Purley doing what he did, and amazing. But yeah, very, very sad stuff. But no, thank you. I appreciate you talking about that. What I want to do, I just want to sort of just talk about like the Run Baby Run restoration that you've been doing over the years. Just wondering what the latest is on it, on the car.
Well, I hid the car away in a mud floor lockup where the grass cutting was, on a 1,000-acre estate that my mate owned at Marlborough. and he sold the place. And when I got ill, I thought I've got to have a project. So I went down there, looked down the bottom, and I thought I could see my car. It was a long way down, it was 100 foot long. So I went back the next day with a bolt cutter and the trailer and cut the lock off, ran down there, and there it was, the body shell. And I had my Buick in there, straight out Buick, which I had in front of it. And the guy that owned the long shed, he never knew my car was there. Excuse me. So I went back. We walked the car back onto the trailer. Nearly killed us. That was heavy. And I went down to the A4, tied it down. And when I got to Reading, they had these power washers up at the top of the hill on the north side of Reading. Okay. But this car must have had 1 million squirrel nuts in it. They must still be cleaning the drains. I blew the lot out. And then when I got it to Brackley, I got some Nitromores, which paint stripper, got the paint off the rusty bits and stuff like that, and then pressure washed it, rolled it around in the grass outside our factory, BBR.
Yeah. And then I put it which is up at Brackley now, isn't it? It's still up there. It's by Mercedes, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I put it in the back of the shop, and I covered it up with sheets. And when I got ill about 5 years ago, I thought, well, I can't watch this daytime television. That'll kill me. And I thought I need a project. So I got the car out, and I've rebuilt it. It's done now, and it's on the button. And it is the most beautiful car. I'm going to put it on display somewhere. I don't know quite where to do it. There was a full Silverstone a couple of weeks ago. It should have gone there, really. But I'm going to put it on display somewhere. It is beautiful. Wow. And it's got a cracking engine, aluminium block. You know, it's really nice. Proper job. And it's got a pneumatic gear change.
Oh.
Yeah, so anyway.
It?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I've saw some pictures of it on the website, and it does look absolutely superb. But I'm guessing pictures don't do it justice. It just looks fantastic thing. Very quickly, you mentioned Brackley. I was quite excited earlier on. I got a message on Twitter from a chap called Keith Hewen, who I'm sure you know, and all the bikes. Keith Hewen, the bikes commentator chap.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. Terrific guy.
Sorry.
He's a terrific guy.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I basically mentioned that I'd interviewed James Toseland a couple of years ago, and then he followed me on Twitter and he saw that we were talking tonight. So hopefully he'll see this, because I'd love to have a chat with Keith. But he said that he's got a great memory. He said he did a test in one of your Monster Turbo Sierra Souped Up monster things, in comparison with the turbocharged bike. And he said your car just lost all the brakes at Brackley, and you all shot round a roundabout faster than anyone has ever been round a roundabout. He said it's one of his favourite memories.
I wouldn't quite like that, but yeah.
No, actually, Keith's just he's elaborating. But he said he's got a lovely memory of it.
My British Racing Green Sapphire, that had 550 horsepower, up to Cadwell, with Jamie Whitton, who had a turbocharged motorbike.
Right.
And we had a fantastic hour going around there. It was really good.
Yeah. Brilliant.
In fact, I saw him at the Isle of Man TT, and I should have said hello to him. If I see him again, I will.
Yeah. Because, I mean, he's a great guy. He's obviously on comms with the Superbikes as well. James Whittam, he's been ill and recovered, and he's on top form, which is good. Good to see.
He's been ill?
Yeah, James Whittam had been ill a few years back. But he's all recovered and happy, and he's on TV now. So
yeah. He's a good commentator now.
Yeah, he's very, very good. Nice chap. Right, very quickly again, time. A lot of people were talking about the BTCC. Do you tune into it? Do you still keep an eye on it these days? No, you stepped away.
I never watch it. No.
Yeah, fair enough. It's changed a lot. Right. Always try and end with some fun questions and stuff. I mean, we could talk for hours here, but I got to pick and choose. Do you follow any motorsport closely these days? Is there anything that you really keep your eye on?
Well, I like to watch the F1.
Yeah.
That's about it, really. About it. I don't watch BTCC on television, and That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of F1. Fair enough. Okay, very quickly, going to rattle through these. Did you have a favourite driver growing up, like a hero who you looked up to?
Did I have a favourite driver?
Yeah, like someone in F1 or in
My
anything.
favourite driver, well, I had 2 or 3 of them,
Yeah.
was Brodie Pittard, terrific driver.
Yeah.
John Fitzpatrick,
Hmm.
and Chris Craft. And I used to pretend to be all 3 of them.
Oh, really? Yeah. In your mind, you're there, and
Yeah.
Oh, lovely, good stuff. Is there a driver that you like now? I mean, you said you don't really follow much motorsport these days. Is there anyone who sort of stands out in your mind?
Well, I think in Formula One, Verstappen is an outstanding talent.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to beat him. That's
No.
it. And he's got, for a kid of, I think he's only 23,
Yeah.
he interviews brilliantly, and he's got a one-track mind, which is what you've got to have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on the current F1 thing, Mark Hudson said, would David like a look around Mercedes F1 HQ? Obviously, it's just next door to your factory. If you haven't done so already.
Well, funny enough, thanks you for the offer. I was shown around by his name escapes me only about 5 weeks ago around the Mercedes factory, because my buildings are next door.
Yeah, it's just up the road, isn't it?
And that was fascinating. So I've had a look round. Thank you very much for the offer. Yeah.
Well, Mark, if David doesn't want to, then I'll do it. I'd love a look around. Okay, your favourite race car that you've ever raced?
Sorry?
What's your favourite car that you've ever raced?
Well, I've been asked that a lot of times, and it's usually before I'm racing. But I think the Chevron B8 that I drove in the Caribbean was just a sensational car. Oh my God. You could chuck that in. It was the only car I've ever been in that you can brake into the corner without the unweighted wheel locking up. So that was the, oh God, excuse me. That was the nicest car I've ever driven, the Chevron B8.
Lovely. I remember speaking with, I think it was Mike Wilds about that, and he was very complimentary of the Chevron cars. He said they were terrific to drive.
Well, Derek Bennett, who built the cars, he and I got on really, really well. And the idiot fell out of the sky on one of those things, I don't know, in front of all his family.
Oh, the hang gliding type thing, was it? Or
all up there, cool, that looks good. Boom. So that. And he was and I think Derek Bennett liked me because most of his customers were rich kids who couldn't really drive that well, but they could afford to buy his cars. But in the Lotus 62, as I told you, I finished 14th twice out of 96 cars at Hockenheim and Nürburgring, and I think he liked it that I was on it all the time in a car that had no business being 14th.
Yeah,
but we kind of got on well, and he was looking forward to me driving one of his cars, but that never happened.
Oh, no.
Well, it did happen because I drove the Chevron B8, but yeah, he was a lovely fella.
Yeah, no shame. You mentioned Crystal Palace earlier. I always ask what your favourite circuit is that you've raced at. Would Crystal Palace be?
Yeah, Crystal Palace. I loved
your
it.
choice?
What people wouldn't know about Crystal Palace is the start-finishing line was right back here, and you went, it's a very, very long straight down to turning left into the S's, which was a tunnel of bushes and trees. And although I'd had pole position, time I got down there, there'd be 5 V8s in front of me.
Yeah.
All bashing into each other, bashing into me. Oh, God. And it used to take me about 7 laps to get by them. They had to run them out of brakes and tyres, and then you could sneak by. And I remember going by a guy called Terry Sanger. He was the last one. He was in a Ford Falcon, white Falcon.
Oh, yeah.
I went alongside him up the inside, and we're flat out in top gear. And I waved at him like that, and he went, and off I went.
Just spat you out.
Yeah, just whacked me, and I went slithering across the grass. Before missed Peter Ashcroft, the full competition manager, by 2 millimeters, spun him round in a circle. He fell over in the dirt, and I stopped about 2 feet from an oak tree. Yeah,
Crikey!
I never complained.
No, it happens. You give it and you take it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never complained. I just
Right, three more. This has become a question that I ask a lot. Someone asked it once. It was a great question. What's your best non-racing memory from a race weekend? I mean, you must have had so many great tales and stories and fun. But
Well, I used to love going with. Well, I mean, my best non-memory is Ronnie Peterson, who we just adored, and he said, "You coming to Monaco?" I said, "Yeah, of course I am." And he said, "Pack your evening gear. I'm going to win the race. I've got a new chassis." And we packed a case, and Kath said, "Have I really got to pack this?" I said, "Well, he says he's going to win the race. He says he's going to win every race, but he's got a new chassis." So he went to a dress and he won the race. And I spotted it at the same time as Patrick Head. They hadn't glued the chassis. You know, you bond the chassis, you put bond in, put the aluminium down, rivet it, and the bond holds it together or glues it together, and the rivet keeps it in place. And they hadn't done it. And if they had done it, you'd have seen an orange or yellow line between the aluminium, you know. And I said, "Patrick, have you spotted that? There's no bonding on there." He said, "Yeah, I've just seen it." And so by the end of the race, the aluminium's doing that, the suspension's all over the place, and you can drive as hard as you like. And I couldn't have my mate Ron being mucked about like that by those dickheads at Lotus. So I went up to this young kid who looked like he knew what he was talking about. I said, "Here, do you want to get some brownie points?" And I'm talking big brownie points. He said, "What for?" I said, "I want you to go up to the Lotus people and say you've noticed there's no bonding on the chassis." "What does that mean?" So I had to explain it to him. I said, "Listen, don't answer any questions. Just tell him there's no bonding." I said, "You will get the biggest brownie points in the world." And I guess he did it because I never saw him again like that.
wow, lovely.
I couldn't have my mate have a chassis that kept winking itself loose.
Not having that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's very cool. I love it. Love it. Is there any race series that you'd like to have had a real go at? Maybe sort of, I don't know, F1 or
I think I should have done that Porsche series. You know, that Porsche series.
yeah.
I mean, I'd have been hard to beat in that. And
That would have been cool.
Ken Britton and I always said we should have done that, but you know, he's no good joining the grid halfway through the season. And I should have done that, and I'd have enjoyed that. Yeah, because they drove pretty hard. Tim Harvey and people like that, they drove those cars hard.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously Tim knows his Porsches. He's still involved with it and does a lot of things. But yeah, that would have been very cool.
I wouldn't have minded doing that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I would have liked to have seen that.
It didn't fit with our customers. We wouldn't have got any Porsche customers. You know, we had,
true. I guess there's the business side, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, our workshop was full of Cosworths, and we did some odd cars. I did a London taxi once. Poor, that went. And we did a load of Bentleys, turbocharged Bentleys, did suspension and stuff on there. And do you know those Bentleys never had a limited slip diff?
Did they not?
Little diff you wouldn't put on a milk float. And that's why so many had accidents. Because as soon as they went off the road, there was no rear drive.
It just...
Morecambe and Wise. Eric Morecambe went into a ditch and put one on the side. Well, normally, when you wake up halfway through an accident, you can drive out of it. But you ain't got a diff, you ain't driving out anywhere. It's going to go where it wanted to go.
Yeah, you're just a passenger, yeah.
Yeah.
Just before the final question, we've got Michael Stroud. Hello, Michael. He says, "I think you were spotted in Pangbourne yesterday." Highly likely, Michael.
Yeah, I was in Pangbourne yesterday. I live in Pangbourne. Well, I don't live in Pangbourne. I live up the road.
Yeah, just over the hill. So there you go, Michael. Correct. Yeah. And while we're talking about Pangbourne, I got married in the Elephant, if anyone knows that, in Pangbourne. Lovely spot. Yeah, I got married in the Elephant. Yeah, lovely spot. Just down from the Bentley garage and the Lambo garage.
Yeah.
Lovely. Top job. Hey, talking local stuff. Love it. Right, final question, and then we're going to wrap it up. I mean, we could be here all night, and I'd love to be, but we can't be. You've raced against loads and loads of drivers. You've watched loads of drivers. Is there anyone that you've raced against and that you've watched who stands out as being not head and shoulders above the rest, but just special, something different, something amazing?
There must be. I can't think of anybody. I mean, I can think of drivers. I mean, John Fitzpatrick was incredible.
Yeah.
And he's the only bloke I sat behind for a whole 20 laps on long circuit Silverstone because I wouldn't have the impertinence to go by him, which I would have got easy anyway. But Yeah. What was the question? Did only drivers? Yeah.
Anyone who just sort of thought, "Oh, he's good. He's something else."
My heroes like Brodie Pittard,
Yeah.
but he didn't last too long, bless him. And he got terribly burnt when he went from saloons to Lolas with great train robbery money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not many people know that, but I do.
No.
And, Roy James. And yeah, it's and I kind of always got on with the drivers because I was very respectful.
Yeah.
Which I think you have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just very quickly, just one final thing that's just popped into my mind. I mentioned about the great train robbery. Roy James. What was he like as a bloke?
Well, when I got banged up in Northampton General, and it's very unlike me, I got a bit depressed.
Yeah.
I was leading in Europe, leading in England. I was about to become a motor racing kind of low-grade household name because I'm going to win both championships. And suddenly I ain't going anywhere with a leg in 23 pieces that they wanted to amputate. And I thought, bro, you must know someone who's worse off than you. And I knew this bloke, Roy James, was banged up.
Yeah.
I didn't know him. And I thought he was at Leicester Gartree prison. So I wrote him a note. I said, I kind of know how you're feeling because I'm doing this, doing that. And you got that 30-year stretch, although there's no way you're going to do 30. And I just said, nice to talk to you. I said, and if you want to visit when I get out, give me a shout. I'll come and say hello. And he sent me the most charming letter back, which I've still got somewhere, in copperplate, thick up, thin down, beautifully constructed. And we had a few things in common, funny enough. And I can't remember. I think I picked him up when he came out.
Wow.
And we just became really, really good friends. He used to call me his brother. And and he was such good company, especially at race meetings, because there was never any envy or jealousy. And he used to say, Brodie, how can we do this quicker? Can we do that? He always wanted to get involved. And I can imagine him planning that robbery, which he did with Bruce Reynolds.
Yeah.
Who planned it. And he was a terrific guy. But you know, he died. He ate all the wrong things, and I'm going to go into details. And he got heart disease, and the geezer said, "Well, if you don't have an operation now, you won't be strong enough." I said, "How much is it going to cost?" He said, 22,000. I said, "I'll pay for it." So I paid for his operation.
Did you really?
Yeah, but he died about 3 years later. Yeah.
That's a shame.
Terrific guy.
Yeah, so and he did a bit of racing himself and all that kind of thing. People don't know a bit of it. I'm fascinated by it.
He was. He was never a natural.
No.
But you know, who is?
Yeah. Well, you.
I am. Yeah. I always found driving a race car the easiest thing in the world. Didn't matter what it was, whose car it was. It was a Land, an Escort, Lotus 62, and all the other cars. Easiest thing I ever did. And I used to think, keep my mouth shut, bro.
But no, that's what just a guy with natural ability, no nonsense attitude. That's the way, in my mind, racing should be done. And I think you're the epitome of it. And it's been absolutely brilliant speaking with you. I mean, I wish we could go on until 5 a.m, but we've all got beds to go to. But Dave, thank you so much for coming on, having a chat.
It's been my pleasure. And I noticed a few people have made comments. And thank you for those comments. Thank you very much for those comments. And I hope you enjoyed the interview. And take a leaf out of my book. Never, ever, ever give up.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Never, ever, ever give up. I would never give up.
That's
even at school. One of the teachers got hold of me one day and said, Brodie, you're an exhibitionist, aren't you? I said, I don't really know. She said, never lose it. And I notice you never give up. And she shook hands with me. It was a lady, and she shook hands and said, well done. So she noticed.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. And we all have good days, we all have bad days, and we all have days where we think, I can't be bothered with this, but You're right.
Yeah.
Stick with everything.
When you think you can't be bothered, that's the day you got to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's probably the perfect line to end on. Again, thank you everyone who's tuned in, all the lovely comments. Everyone's been very, very kind about the interview this evening. So thank you very much. And of course, thank you to you, Dave. It's been absolutely brilliant speaking with you.
It's been my pleasure. And anybody that's made any comments, you stay safe.
Absolutely.
My dad said to me once, he said, son, always remember this. You must always be kind to people. And I think I have been.
Yeah.
If I get done over, I'm pretty angry, bad news, but I like to be kind to people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's borne out in all the love and all the lovely comments that we've had about you in the on this chat. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you to you, Dave. And I'm sure we'll catch up very soon, because you're only about 5.5 miles over my right shoulder. So
come by for one of Peggy's coffees. They're pretty good. Ground coffee. Come by.
Always fancy a coffee. I might bring some photos for you to put a scribble on as well.
Okay.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, thanks to you, Dave. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Thanks very much.